watching Over the Edge from Event Horizon with John Michael Godier.
And I'm back with Dr. Travis Langley. Another thing I wanted to ask about, we were talking earlier about the threat of, society being set back to square one by a solar flare, but worse things can happen, such as an asteroid. Now, if we found out tomorrow that there was an asteroid that was going to hit Earth in 1 year and we don't have time to deflect it or do anything about it, it's the end. We will go extinct. But you're not running out of food, you're not running out of resources, you're just going to get gobsmacked. What's different there? How do people react in that kind of a situation, just an absolute fatalist situation, even though they're not under any other stress?
Well, looking at the things that we know about human nature, things we do, some people cling to hope no matter what. There are an awful lot of people with a very strong sense of an afterlife. So people with a strong sense of an afterlife, okay, well, that means this part of that journey is ending no matter what. So you could get an increased number of people who are getting religious where they weren't before, because that's the only potential for continued existence from their point of view. Others will see it as hopeless. We've seen suicide cults. We've seen individuals who committed suicide when they thought the world was going to end. Groups that have wiped themselves out. But most people don't do that in circumstances in which people truly believe the world was about to end. There are people as the world year 1000 was coming, there are people who thought that meant the world was about to end because of a biblical reference to 1000 years. Repeatedly, we see groups that think the world is about to end. And they're gathering, they're pulling together, they're supporting each other. And for most of them, while there is a lot of fear, there's also a sense of hope for whatever might come next. And when it's as bleak as, this asteroid's wiping us out, there will be those who are taking some solace in that. Some as okay, well, let's build our robots and let them outlive us. Other people are going to try to live deep under the earth, and they're still going to convince themselves. And then there'll be people who just won't believe it's going to happen, clinging to hope for the last second that it's going to miss.
And there's a certain attractiveness to that, and it might be because of the zeitgeist of our times, where we have rapidly advancing technology and ideas within science fiction, for example, molecular nanotechnology, that at least hypothetically you could create a zombie with that. You could reanimate a corpse with something like that. We can actually see a light at the end of the tunnel as far as zombies actually being realistic in that sense. Do you think there's that fear, though, of the impending future?
There is definitely. It's why the show Westworld is so popular. People looking in Westworld, it takes a dark look at human nature. We're even looking, it's like, where is the hope? But hopefully it will turn out to be, okay, here's some kind of hope for the future rather than just being another bleak look at where the human race is going. We have these fears of technology, and our fears of technology aren't the same as back when the first Westworld movie came out. Back when that came out, they were just afraid of technology gone wrong. Now they're afraid of AI growing sentient. And what do these things mean for the human race? Where are we going? That singularity people keep talking about. When we get to that point, we just cannot predict what things will be like when the computers are able to program computers that are faster than themselves. And that, what will the generation of computers be that? We have no idea. That's what the singularity is, that point that we cannot predict beyond. And there's a fear of what are we heading to? What will the human race still be at that point? And so these kinds of stories let us think about the feelings. They let us think about what we might do in strange survival situations without it being so unpleasant and so uncomfortable because it being too close to home. And of course, for this kind of fiction to work, the characters have to be very true. They have to be written. Some of the writers might study psychology. A lot of them are people who simply have a very good sense of human nature. So they're able to write characters who are true to real humanity, and the actors are playing them that well. If they don't play it in a way that is true to human nature, the audience isn't going to buy it. Science fiction, fantasy, horror, they have greater needs in terms of getting the humanity right in the stories.
Now, what do you think the psychology of that is? Giving up your biological paradigm, a human paradigm. You mentioned Westworld. In a world like that, you get people uploading their brain into a new body or a computer, and then they can be loaded back into a human body. Psychologically, what does that do to a primate like us that, did not evolve to do anything like that? Do you think people would reject it, or do you think they would actually do that if the technology were available?
People debate these things enough. It is clear that some people think if you upload yourself into a computer, it's still you. My point of view is that you upload yourself into a computer, it is a copy of you. It is not you any more than your kids are you. It is a copy of you. However, you might be able to think of that as a different form of reproduction. So you may have some kind of continued existence. Although when you consider the fact that cells throughout our entire bodies have been replaced, our molecules have been replaced over and over throughout our lives, are we really who we started off as in the first place? Or are we bit by bit copies of ourselves? So it can be a complicated thing when you start talking about, what is me? Grammatically, that's not correct, but but that's the thought. What is me, or what am I? And it is something. Some people love the idea of being uploaded into a computer or an android as a way of having a form of immortality, because we all know we will die. We know we will die. And so the thought for some is, well, what if we can at least continue to exist in a different form? Even if it's a copy, it's somehow me also. And plenty of people, it sounds very clear that there are a lot of people who would go for that.
I think people would, but you raise an interesting point that it probably isn't going to be you. It's going to be a copy of you, unless maybe by some magical technology you can start replacing neurons with artificial ones, and then eventually after a century you have a fully cybernetic brain or something. Who knows? But it's interesting because that is in a way a form of zombie, though, isn't it? If you create a copy of yourself, a digital copy uploaded in a machine, and it comes back, that I suppose would qualify as a zombie.
If it is merely emulating you following programs and not truly sentient, of course, how will we know? How can we argue that we're not simulations in someone else's program? My own concern is, well, I think, therefore I am, that old thing. As I feel like I'm real, that works for me. It's in terms of a practical aspect. We are going to have to answer questions of, when you can just duplicate people over and over too, it's like that means you're making all these sentient beings. Do they get voting rights? Well, then let's just manufacture 200 million members of your party real quick. And these are ethical issues, these are practical issues that people are going to have to address in the upcoming decades.
Now, another question that we get into is, say you have this influence of technology on the human species, and you could say that we are not what we were when we first evolved. Early humanity didn't have things like schools or technology. Now we do, which arguably says we have altered ourselves on a fundamental basis with simple things like education.
Right.
Now, technology is going to play into that as we get increasingly advanced technology. What do we become? Do we become absolutely dependent on that technology? Meaning, over our lifetime, we've watched the human race addict itself to a prosthetic brain, a cell phone, that did not used to exist. Mm-hmm. Has that fundamentally changed the human species and how we think of things and how we view ourselves?
Some of the measurable things we see as a result of that, the people's expectations, but in terms of measurable, individuals who spend a lot of time on the cell phones, which means a lot of the younger generation too, aren't as good at reading body language as they used to be. It's changing social interactions and changing behavior. And a lot of people are, even as people have these fears of the advancing technology, these fears of AI, we keep building them. We get mad at Siri for not understanding, what we said on the phone, and yet, wouldn't we be afraid if Siri were really able to understand and have a conversation with us about it? But in the moment, You want Siri to understand you more accurately. And just bit by bit, degree by degree, we keep working our way there. Even as Stephen Hawking and many others express their great fear of the advances in AI, other people keep pursuing those advances in AI. So they are happening, they're going there because of things people want. We look all throughout history. Changes in technology, changes in culture alter people. They alter culture. For example, before the Industrial Revolution, adolescence was not really a concept. You were a child, you were an adult. With the Industrial Revolution, you start getting people with greater variety of options in jobs and a growing sense of there being this other thing in the middle, in the teens. Adolescence emerged as a concept largely less than 200 years ago. And that's so key to how many of us think of human nature when it didn't exist before. And there are cultures where they still don't have that particularly strong concept of there being this thing in between being a child and adult. That's just one example of many of how culture alters the way we think of human nature itself.
That was a bit of material that went over the edge. A bonus clip from a full episode of Event Horizon. New episodes every Thursday, so do be sure to hit subscribe. The full episode should be on your screen right about now.